Hey, Music Junkies. Grateful to share this with you today. You know, it's been a rough year. We've lost so many legends this year. First Brian Wilson, then Ozzy in the summer, and then recently we lost Ace Frehley. Ace was a guitar player that influenced so many great bands and so many songs, you could never calculate it. His influence is incomparable in rock and hard rock, and he didn't really get that credit. Now, I was honored to spend well over an hour with him a short time ago, picking his brain and getting the history behind his incredible contributions. And I've only shared about 10 minutes of this interview. This is going to be uncut, a full hour and 10 minutes. It's the last detailed interview that he did and covers the best of his time with Kiss and his solo records, including New York Groove. I love it because the other guys in Kiss gave him a hard time about it, you know, when all the members of Kiss were doing solo albums. And in the end, Ace outsold them all. It's a great insight into Ace as one of the most influential guitarists in rock history and just an all-around great guy, really funny guy. Here it is.
Well, you know, I started playing guitar when I was 13, and then 3 years later, the whole English invasion happened. Yeah, the Beatles, Stones, Led Zeppelin, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton with Cream. I saw Cream's first New York appearance. I also saw The Who's first New York appearance when I was 15. I'm telling you, that was something else.
That's amazing.
Their albums hadn't even been released yet, I don't think. I quit school and I went down to the Murray the K show in Midtown at a theater. And I was actually going to see Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels. And I had no idea The Who and the Cream were going to be the opening act. It was spectacular. And I knew the minute I saw both bands that they were going to be huge.
Well, Ace, let me do a little intro. We'll get right into it. Does that work for you?
Yeah. You want my social security number? I'm kidding.
On this episode of Revelations, I am honored to be with the Spaceman, one of the original 4 members of Kiss, a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, and obviously one of the most iconic guitarists of the rock era. With a few power chords, he started a revolution that still goes on today. So many guitarists influenced by his playing, and I want to introduce Mr. Ace Frehley. Ace, great to have you on the program.
Great to be on, Adam. Thank you for inviting me, and I want to say hi to all my fans, Ace fans, Kiss fans, men in business suits fans.
Well, Ace, let me go back to the very beginning and ask you, I'd love to find out, what was it for you, whether it was a song that you heard, a person in your life, or just a moment? What was the moment that kicked open the door to your mind and made you want to pursue music, knowing that that was the only thing that you could do? There's no plan B. What was that moment?
I mean, that point happened before Kiss. You know, I was in another group called Malimo, and we were recording for RCA at RCA Studios in Midtown, which was amazing because that's, you know, where Frank Sinatra recorded. And we tracked 3 or 4 songs, and then ultimately the RCA decided not to bring us on as a group. So we really didn't have a record deal. So at that juncture, I started looking, you know, in newspapers, and I looked in the Village Voice, and, you know, there was an ad for a group with recording contract with Flash, and I forget exactly what the wording was. You probably might know it. But there was a famous ad, and I think like 50 guitar players in the New York area applied to it and showed up at the Loft on 23rd Street where Gene and Paul and Peter were auditioning people. And I showed up in one red sneaker and one orange sneaker because I was running late. And you know, when the room is dark, you can't tell the difference between red and orange. So I didn't even realize it was going to, you know, but that's like a story that's been told and retold and told and retold, you know, multiple times. but it wasn't done on purpose. And my mother drove me down in a Cadillac, with a Marshall lamp. And I had a reverse Firebird with a single pickup and banjo tuning pegs. Same exact guitar that Eric Clapton used for the Farewell Cream tour. I auditioned and they said, great. We like the way you play. We like the way you look. And we'll get back to you within a week or two. But, later on down the road, Paul admitted to me that they knew that day I was the guy.
Very cool.
Yeah, I guess they wanted to, they had other guitar players they had set up, and they didn't want to blow everybody off. They wanted to keep all their options open. God forbid I drop dead,
Well, Ace, I love the story about, for Christmas 1964, 13 years old, you got your first guitar. Was it a Kent?
Yeah, I think it was a Kent.
Little Japanese amp. And I love the story that you tell about the first E chord that you hit.
Yeah, it was, I played every bar and shithole from the Bronx to Manhattan to in New Jersey. It's been an adventure. A lot of these young groups get signed because of a couple of songs they recorded, and they don't really understand what they're getting into, because it's such a cutthroat business, and there's so much competition now because there's just so many bands. When I was in my mid-teens, there was only a dozen real rock bands that I considered, great. And music has changed dramatically.
You don't answer ads in newspapers anymore. And that's where a lot of these great bands connected, and such a great story about how that happened with you guys. But, you came from a musical family. I mean, your father came from Dutch immigrants, your mother from German descent. Your family all played instruments. Your dad played the church organ. You never took one lesson as a guitarist, though. Not one lesson. You didn't go to school for it. You were just self-trained.
Well, I was the youngest of three children, and everyone played the piano. And then when my brother was about 16, 17, he got an acoustic guitar, and him and my sister were doing folk songs. My brother taught me 3 or 4 chords. I didn't want to play folk music. I wanted to play rock and roll. So I tried figuring out, some Rolling Stones stuff, some Beatles stuff, the simple ones with 3 or 4 chords. And then I just developed my technique. I decided very early on that I wanted to be the lead guitarist. I didn't want to fool around with rhythm. Yeah, I wanted to be the lead guy. And I was talking to my brother the other day about it, and he goes, I remember, he calls me Paul because that's my given name. He goes, Paul, I remember you really didn't want to be bothered playing rhythm guitar. You wanted to play lead. And my dream came true.
In so many ways, and you made a lot of other people's dreams come true.
With no lessons, but I think I got it by osmosis. I sung in the church choir, so I did get some vocal training from the choir director, and I understood harmonies. I listened to my brother, my father, my sister, all play piano. My father was a brilliant pianist. He could play Chopin, Beethoven, Mozart. He instilled in me one day when I was talking to him. I was sitting on the bench with him, and he goes, Paul, it's not the way, you can play the right notes, but how you use the pedals on the ground, each piano has 3 pedals. He says, how you use those pedals and how hard you hit the notes is all technique. And he said, that's what you have to master. And I never forgot that. And, I've realized now that when I play a solo, sometimes I'll pick the string, but I'll also hit it with my thumb, and I'll get harmonics, and you can control the lead solos that you're playing a lot more when you use, instead of just picking everything, you use your hand to muffle some of the songs, and and then of course the vibrato is a big deal. Learning how to use a vibrato, and I developed a vibrato that a lot of people say is like one of the best vibratos in the business. Because I can bend down, I can bend up, I can go fast, I can go slow. Just practice. Practice makes perfect. If a kid asks me, what should I do? I'd say, listen to those old rock and roll records, the blues guitar. Yeah, I used to listen to B.B. King, Albert King, Freddie King, Chuck Berry, the Rolling Stones, all that early stuff. Figure that stuff out. I was always a blues-based guitarist, and will always be. I haven't changed my style since the day I started.
Going back to the Kiss tryout, a lot of people don't realize this, but you came up with the logo. Tell us about how you guys came up with the name Kiss and designing the band's logo.
Well, I think Paul came up with the name Kiss. It just kind of slipped out. We were throwing names around, and we all kind of looked at Paul and said, hey, that might not be bad, And then I went home that night and I designed the logo. And I think I have it, the button. Where is it? I have the first design I did of the logo. And I just had it here the other night. And of course, it's missing. Whatever.
I've seen it before. I've seen it online before.
You've seen the button?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I drew a kiss with a diamond over the eye, and I put lips under it. And I showed it to the guys, and they liked it very much, but they decided to make it simpler, get rid of the lips and get rid of the dot over the eye. And then all Paul did was, since he had a lot of art training because he went to music and art, he just refined it, with a rapidograph pen and drew the lines straighter. And that's how the logo happened.
It was funny growing up. I grew up in a small town in Idaho.
Okay.
Yeah. And I discovered you guys through my uncle. And then my dad bought one of your records. And, I took it to school and all the kids started listening. Back in those days, we had the vinyl, but we also had cassette tapes were coming in. And,
Right.
Then came the gauntlet of parents who were like, that's devil music. It means night in Satan's service. I could still remember all that satanic panic from back in the day.
Backtrack a second. Did you say father bought a Kiss record?
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was cool. He was...
That's really bizarre because most people that I talk to say, I bought the Kiss records and my parents, threw them out.
Yeah, I know.
For you, it was the complete opposite.
Yeah, my dad was different. My dad had Zeppelin and he had Black Sabbath. And, he was a baby boomer. He was born in the 50s, in the mid-50s. But
did he play guitar?
He didn't. He just loved music. And so he had the Kiss Alive record. And he was always into hard rock and heavy metal. And so he was different than the other kids' dad. I remember one time a kid was picking on me at school, and he said, my dad could beat up your dad. And I said, yeah, well, my dad listens to Led Zeppelin. Your dad listens to Conway Twitty.
Where did you grow up?
Blackfoot, Idaho, little teeny small town in Idaho. But yeah, so I was fascinated by Kiss as I got to know your records, and my dad shared that. And as a kid, opening up the gatefold and your decision to paint your faces and the nicknames and everything, really fascinated by that. And I know a lot of our young people would be. Where did that come from? Where did you guys start the idea of that?
Well, we started performing at this club in Long Island, New York, called the Daisy. And, once we got the name and we started, and Paul and Gene had written a lot of songs. I don't think I had written anything at that juncture. And I think we may have done a couple of covers. I can't remember. But what we were doing in this little club was developing the makeup that we were going to wear. I mean, one night I walked out on stage with my whole face silver. I mean, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And then one night I got serious and I decided to do these cool stars, silver stars, outlined in black and black makeup. And, Paul used to he had the same makeup back then that he has now. The only difference was originally he had a circle around his eye, like the dog from the Little Rascals. And one night I said to him, why don't you try a star? It would be a little more interesting. And he tried it, and I don't think he'd ever give me credit for designing his makeup, but that's what happened.
Wow, very cool.
That's what happened. And I'll swear on a stack of Bibles on that one.
Well, Space Ace, and later the Spaceman, Ace, you got your nickname from the ability to with the ladies. What was your secret?
Oh, well, I don't know. I guess I was a cute kid, and I met a lot of girls in school, and I had this one girlfriend, Michelle, and she lived up in Riverdale, New York, and it's a higher end neighborhood than like where I grew up, The buildings were more expensive to live in, people were driving nicer cars, It was just an upscale neighborhood. Anyway, she had about 5 or 6 girlfriends. So, I was playing in a band, and I used to bring the guys up to the neighborhood with me. I go, come on and hang out. There's like a whole bunch of girls that don't have boyfriends. I ended up, setting them up, and they got along famously with some of the gals. And eventually they just, one night my drummer said to me, you're an ace for setting us up with these hot broads. And I said, well, I mean, I wasn't gonna take on 6 girls in one night. So
Yeah.
I said, you're welcome. And that's how I got the nickname Ace. But moving fast forward, when I joined Kiss, my real name's Paul. And Paul's name is Paul, even though it's originally Stanley. So Paul wanted to be called Paul Stanley. And I didn't know what I wanted to be Paul Frehley. And every time, Gene or Peter would go, hey, Paul, we both look. We didn't know. They didn't know. So I said, this shit isn't going to fly. Why don't you just call me by my nickname I got in high school? And that's the story how Ace got, all simple stuff, There was no heavy thought behind it. It was just, hey, you got 2 Pauls. Somebody's got to come up with a different name.
Well, you worked as a cab driver as Kiss was going, and then Bill Alcoin started paying you. You had some interesting jobs, though.
I used to deliver liquor. I used to be a cab driver. I used to be a mailman. At Christmas time, I heard that the U.S. Post Office, hires extra people for Christmas because, there's a lot more mail to be delivered. So I went down for the test and passed it. And I was a mailman for 6 months. So I mean, I've delivered furniture, was a mailman, worked for the post office, delivered liquor. I remember there was a strike one Christmas, and the guy whose liquor store I worked in, he had like 4 or 5 employees. And for some reason, he took a liking to me because I was kind of a funny guy and, interesting to talk to. I have 163 IQ, so I can handle a conversation with just about anybody. And he decided to take me up to the Catskills and buy liquor because the trucks weren't delivering the liquor to Manhattan. And, liquor stores were losing money because it was the holiday season. And, people buy a lot more liquor during the holiday season than they do, during a regular season. So he invited me to go up with him. I drove up with him. We filled the truck up with booze, spent the night in the Holiday Inn, and then drove back to the store and unloaded everything, with the rest of the guys that worked there.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I love the story of Kiss, the rise of Kiss, because your first gig was at the Popcorn Club, fewer than 10 people there. You guys have such a cool story because, it's not like an overnight success. Reflect back on the early days, the band didn't just magically become the biggest band in the world. It took a good 3 years after your formation, 73, to break through with, Alive and Destroyer. And let's talk about that. I love that progression. You were touring like crazy. There's a lot of publicity around the first album, but actually looking back, I only sold 75,000 copies, and then Hotter Than Hell struggled, and then Dressed to Kill. But it was Alive that put you guys over the top.
I think Alive was successful because we're really a theatrical rock group, and a regular album doesn't show that. So Alive, we had a big package with us live. It showed the stage. We each wrote little notes to our fans. It had a booklet with pages of us, playing. It was like a souvenir for our concerts. And I think that's what made fans excited about the record. And it was like a souvenir for a Kiss show. And I think, I forget whose idea it was. Whatever idea it was the right idea.
Well, it's such a cool thing because your label, Casablanca, was almost bankrupt. Kiss was in danger of losing their contract. Both parties needed a breakthrough to survive, and that was a perfect way to do it with that live album, like you said, because people could get the energy of what it was to be at a Kiss show.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the cover of Dressed to Kill, you go, who are these idiots in makeup with suits on? It didn't really nobody really understood what we did live. That's why the Alive record, made it became so popular, because it really showed what we do live. From that point on, we just started playing arenas all over the place. We weren't playing small theaters anymore. And, in a matter of a couple of years, we all became millionaires. It was nuts. It was crazy.
Kiss, the band that taught us how to rock.
What?
No, my dad told me that. He said, this is the band that's going to teach you how to rock. And then I later heard people say, Kiss, the band that taught us how to rock. And that's how I introduced it to my friends. Man, this is the band that's going to teach us how to rock, And it was something really special. And that's what Kiss Alive was.
Were you ever in a band?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was a singer in a couple different bands, jazz band, rock band. I used to sing Sinatra type standards.
I met Sinatra. I had a road manager who previously worked for Sinatra, And Sinatra was playing about a half an hour from my house at a theater in the Round. And he got me in and he brought me backstage, and I got to shake Sinatra's hand. And I was like, I said, is this really happening? Who shakes Sinatra's hand? I mean, what are the odds of that?
No kidding. Wow. That's amazing.
And then subsequently down the road in 1970, I snuck back into a concert at Randall's Island. It was a peace concert, Steppenwolf, Mountain, Jimi Hendrix Experience, bada bing, bada bing. It was, I snuck backstage and I'm talking to all these rock stars because I had hair down to here and I had a snakeskin star. And I was wearing lemon yellow hot pants and Vans checkerboard. And I noticed that some of the guys in the bands were coming out of this, little doorway. And there was no laminates back then. There were no stick-on passes. So I just walked into there and I looked at the guy like I was somebody, and I did look like I was in one of the bands. So he just let me go backstage. So I'm hanging out for about 15 minutes. I'm talking to John Kay from Steppenwolf, and I can't even remember some of the other people I was talking to. And then the stage manager came over to me and he goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm nobody." He goes, "Oh, you snuck backstage?" I go, "Yeah, I did." He goes, "Can you do anything?" I go, "Yeah, I'm a musician. I can change guitar strings, tune guitars, set up amplifiers, drums, you name it, I could do it." So he said, "Well, we're a little short-handed tonight. You mind working for free?" And I said, "No, I'd be more than happy to." And next thing you know, I'm setting up Mitch Mitchell's drums from the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Wow.
And then I got a chance to shake Jimmy's hand. I mean, when I think back on it now, it just seems like a dream. It seems surreal.
Seems meant to be, what you would do later.
It was just, so many crazy things have happened in my life. Yeah, when I think back on my life, it just seems like maybe somebody wrote it previously, like wrote a novel about a rock star starting. I have no idea, but I mean, the stuff that happened to me.
Yeah, it's magical.
I go on for hours.
Well, let me ask you this, Ace. On Alive, Rock and Roll All Night, that first came out as a single. It went to number 68. And then when it came out on Alive, the live version of it went to number 12, and it just blew up. Became you guys' signature song. I remember reading that Bogart had asked you guys to create an anthem, and the song itself, I understand, was inspired by the Slade song, Mama, We're All Crazy Now. Mama, we're all crazy now. Tell me about the recording session and about that song, what you remember about putting it together.
I remember we had recorded the song, and then we decided to bring in 25, 30 people, the president of my album company, Neil Bogart, all the people from the record label, friends, I can't remember all the people that were there, but they, we had the song already recorded. They played it through the speakers and everybody just sang along. They set up like 4 or 5 microphones and we had all these people singing on the chorus. And that's why you get that group chorus effect, because so many people are singing.
Didn't they use their jacket zippers to create a sound too?
Oh, I don't know about that.
I heard that somewhere.
Well, it could very well be true, I mean, you got 4 guys in a band. You got 4 different stories, some of them don't always click or coincide with reality. One guy will say one thing, one guy will say another thing, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
That's right.
Well, we have some people have selective memory too,
Well, the original Rock and Roll All Night didn't have a guitar solo.
Yeah, I was listening to that because my co-producer, Steve Brown on 10,000 Volts, he said, now that Kiss isn't performing, I think you should add a couple of Kiss songs to your set. And he said, you should definitely do Rock and Roll All Night because it's number 5 in Spotify. It was one of the most played Kiss songs. So I listened to it and I said, there's no guitar solo. And then I went on YouTube and found a later version of us playing it live. And we had added the guitar solo down the road. So I learned that one and went over great. We played it live, a couple of weeks ago.
Well, when Destroyer came out, I wanted to ask you about the double-sided hit, Detroit Rock City and Beth, because Detroit Rock City was such a great guitar duel between you and Paul. And tell me about that song, what you remember, because I had heard that the song was originally going to be about, the music scene in Detroit, possibly like a party song, but Bob Ezrin was trying to get the band away from that and came from an old demo and kind of came from a true story that had happened to a Kiss fan, right?
Well, Bob Ezrin was an amazing producer and musician. He actually instructed me and Paul what to play on that solo. He wrote the solo. Me and Paul didn't. First, he wrote the part I played, and then he told Paul what the harmonies were. Worked out great. I'll never forget. So many people have come up to me and say, "Wow, that's such a great solo you wrote." I go, "I didn't write it." I always believe in giving credit where credit is due, and Bob Ezrin wrote that solo. He also changed Beth around a lot, and he did all the piano work on Beth. We changed the name from Beck. Peter originally had called the song Beck, B-E-C-K, and we decided to call it Beth.
Oh, Beth, what can I do? Beth,
Peter does a great job on the vocals, but a lot of the song was rewritten by Bob Ezrin. Turned out to be one of our biggest hits.
boys will be playing all night.
Well, Detroit Rock City, that was based on a real life incident that happened in Charlotte. And I remember reading that Paul had read about somebody gotten hit by a car and killed outside the arena. And that's what kind of inspired the lyrics. Is that right?
If you say so. I didn't like the lyrics, so I wouldn't know. That sounds right. I think I remember hearing that story.
Well, on Beth being the B side and Detroit Rock City being the A side, and then a DJ turning it around and Beth became your biggest hit. There's been so many rumors about Beth and how much Kiss hated the song. Tell me what the truth is on that. Because the rumor is you guys didn't even want to come to the recording session.
I always loved the song. I thought it was a beautiful song. I thought Peter did a great job on the vocals, and most of it is Bob Ezrin playing piano. I love the song. The only problem with the song was that it wasn't in character with the rest of the songs we played. Yeah. And that was probably what Paul and Gene were thinking if they made statements like they didn't like the song. But I thought, a good song is a good song. I don't care if it's classical, country, or hard rock, If you got a good song, people are going to like it. So I don't know how you categorize Beth, but Turned out to be a big hit, just like I Was Made for Loving You. I hated that song because I didn't like disco. And I was looking at watching a video the other day of Vinnie Poncia talking about him and Paul working on I Was Made for Loving You. And it became a huge hit because at the time disco was really big. I wanna see it in your eyes. But I really didn't. I kind of felt betrayed. I think a lot of our fans felt betrayed that Kiss did a disco rock song.
Yeah.
Because we're known for being a hard rock, heavy metal band. And it was such a departure from that some fans didn't like it.
And that one came from a bet, though, right? That Paul had made a bet that it's way easier to write a disco song or a pop song than a rock song. And right?
Maybe. I'm trying to remember. The one thing I hated about the song was I used to have to go and halfway through the song, sometimes my wrist would tighten up because I'm just going. You know, and the only time I get a break is when I break into the guitar solo, and then Paul switches to the part that I was playing through the song. Besides that, I didn't like the fact that we were doing a disco song. I thought it was not in character with the band. Be that as it may, it turned out to be a huge hit, so what the hell do I know?
Right. Well, and a lot of artists at that time, rock artists, were doing kind of disco, right? Elton John and Rod Stewart, and even Pink Floyd had a little bit of had a little bit of disco in.
Disco song did Elton John do?
Oh, he did a couple. He did "Don't Go Breaking My Heart." It had kind of that disco feel to it, you know.
So don't go breaking my heart. I won't go breaking.
Rod Stewart did a disco song.
Oh yeah. Do you think I'm sexy?
You want my body and you think I'm sexy. Come on.
If you want my body and you think I'm sexy, that was total disco.
That was a great song, but I don't think it was as disco as I Was Made for Loving You.
Yeah. It kind of had that.
To be honest,
Yeah.
that song didn't bother me as much as I Was Made for Loving You. Not that it wasn't a good song. It's just that, you know, my taste.
Yeah. Well, and Pink Floyd did it a little bit in Another Brick in the Wall, right? The guitar on that's very disco. I thought it was kind of with the times. Getting into Love Gun. It's such a great solo on Love Gun. Tell me about that, what you remember about that.
Love Gun's a great song. I believe Paul wrote it. And I'm going to be honest and be truthful about the guitar solo. I actually stole that solo from a dear friend of mine. Had a band years and years ago called the Blues Magoos. And they had a hit called We Ain't Got Nothing Yet. And in that song is the same ascending guitar solo. I enhanced on, I didn't do it note for note, but I enhanced on the solo. But I got it from that originally. Look up the Blues Magoos. We Ain't Got Nothing Yet. You'll hear the song.
Well, let me ask you, as we get into your solo stuff, before we get into that, Christine 16 from that album, written and sung by Gene.
Christine,
my understanding is that Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen played on the original demos, and then when you recorded your version of the song, that he wanted you to kind of do what Eddie was doing. Is that true? Is there any truth to that?
I remember doing that solo, and it was completely mine. Eddie Van Halen had nothing to do with the writing of that solo.
Christine 16, great song, and it's
I
kind
don't
of
think it will be politically correct to do that song today.
yeah, I know. A guy who's in love with a 16-year-old, right?
I mean, that shows you how times change. I mean, I can't think of a band that would have the guts to put out a song called Christine 16 or, Joan, I don't know, whatever. You're talking about an underage girl, which will get you in jail for statutory. Gene's going, I have to have you. I have to have you, in the lyrics. So,
16. I've got to have you. I've got to have you.
it wouldn't be happening today, 2024. No way.
Well, what did you think about when Tone Loc sampled your guitar riff in his song, Funky Cole Medina, that took the sample from Christine 16? Did you ever hear that?
I haven't.
Yeah, it was a hit in the 90s or late 80s, and he sampled the guitar riff on that.
I never even heard that song, but the one song that bothers me the most is, what's the name of the group? They ripped off Shock Me pretty much. The chord pattern is pretty much the same as Shock Me.
Shock me. We can come together.
Buck Cherry.
Buck Cherry. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Listen to that. Listen to the song and listen to Shock Me. And they pretty much ripped off the chords. I mean, I could have sued them, but, everybody rips off everybody to a certain extent. Nobody's ever sued me. So I just let it go.
Well, while we're on the subject of Shock Me, tell me about Shock Me, one of your greatest guitar solos for sure.
I love that song. It was inspired by me getting electrocuted in Lakeland, Florida when Kiss was on tour. And subsequently, further on down the road, I decided to write a song about it. Getting electrocuted, was the catalyst that made me come up with the song Shock Me.
Shock me. Make me feel better.
I think it's a great solo. It's one of my favorite solos. It just happened. Like everything else in my life. I don't plan anything. Kiss retires and all of a sudden, I'm going to have 3 videos out in such a short span of time. My first video is already certified over 1 million views on YouTube, and the numbers are just climbing and climbing. 1 million Spotify downloads and crazy. It almost seemed like a planned thing that I did, but I didn't. I was just rushing to finish my album, and it just turned out that, I finished my album right around the time Kiss decided to retire. It wasn't this master plan to try to make Paul and Jane look bad. And things happen the way they're supposed to happen. Yeah.
Well, 1978, you dropped your first solo album, and I recall hearing that you got the motivation to do a solo album when you were in a band meeting with Paul and Gene, and they made some kind of a sarcastic remark to you. Tell me about that.
Well, we were sitting at a board table with about 12 people involved in the KISS organization, and we were talking about who's going to be working with who. I was lucky enough to snag Eddie Kramer as my producer because Eddie loved me and we got along great. I've been to his house for dinner a couple of times, and I knew he was an amazing producer for me because I liked the way he worked. I liked the way he always thought outside the box. He was willing to take chances that a lot of other producers wouldn't do. And we rented the Colgate Mansion in Sharon, Connecticut, and we got all these interesting, natural ambience that you wouldn't have been able to get in a recording studio. I mean, we had Anton Fig set up in the foyer. We had mics up on top, and we were getting natural ambience. I was recording all the acoustic guitars in a library that was all wood. So, everything sounded so rich, and like you listen to Fractured Mirror. It's a great acoustic guitar sound. And Anton Fig, was a huge part of the success of that record because he's just such an amazing drummer. He recently did a tribute to Link Wray with Jimmy Page playing guitar. I mean, he's one of the most well-respected drummers in the world. And he's actually playing on 10,000 volts.
Well, what was that sarcastic remark that they made in that meeting? There was some story about you kind of got the motivation to do a solo album because when you were in a band meeting with Paul and Gene and they made some kind of a sarcastic remark to you.
Oh, what they said to me was, the way they said it, it sounded like I wasn't able to do a solo album on my own. So that, they said, Ace, if you need any help, don't hesitate to call us, as if I wasn't capable of doing a solo record on my own. And that just made me want to make a much better record.
And in the end, all the Kiss solo records, it's the biggest Kiss solo record. That had to feel pretty good.
I showed them.
Well, it's kind of fun when things work out that way.
Ironically, I didn't want to record the song New York Groove. Eddie Kramer kept bugging me. We had already gone like 2/3 of the way through the record. And I was listening to the songs and I'm going, these all sound great. And then he plays me his New York Groove song, and I go, it doesn't go with the rest of the songs. He goes, yeah, but we can make it sound good.
You better believe I'm back in the New York groove.
So finally, when we moved from Sharon, Connecticut to the recording studio at Radio City Music Hall, there used to be a studio up there in the back, up a staircase, I don't know. Yeah. And we did New York Groove there and a few other songs. Who knew it was going to become my biggest hit?
It was originally written by Russ Ballard and recorded by Hello in 75. And then you got turned on to the song, and it became a huge hit.
So many people think I wrote the song, and I go, I didn't write the song, because, I got all the notoriety. Yeah, I mean, even at Yankee Stadium, when they hit a home run, they play New York Groove. The Rangers play New York Groove. It's crazy.
Well, and it actually is one of the biggest hits, even comparable to Kiss, because, Beth did better, and I Was Made for Loving You, but and Rock and Roll Night, but it's just barely behind those three songs of being the biggest hit, even if you include the Kiss songs.
I think I looked on Spotify a month ago and it had 53 million downloads or something.
Huge song. Did you ever get props from the guys in Kiss after your album was so successful?
Gene would never admit it. Gene would always say his records sold more. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was hard for those guys to compliment me. And I don't know why they were like that. They never wanted to give me credit where credit was due. They always tried to hog the spotlight when we were performing live. I had arguments with the video director. Yeah, I go, look, when I'm doing a guitar solo, I want the camera on me. I don't want it on Paul shaking his ass. And those, that shit happened. And I don't know. It was just, that when I did something amazing, they would just say, okay, that's a take. It was never like, I never got a lot of praise from those guys away from, in the studio or even the way I played live. It was never, I don't know if they were jealous or, well, I think I know Paul was jealous of me because, he was a guitar player and a struggling lead guitar player. And I think he always wanted to be able to play as well as I did, but that ain't going to happen.
Well, I appreciate the candor. Well, I got to ask you about Ace Frehley's Comet.
Ace Frehley's Comet, yeah. Well, it was originally called Frehley's Comet.
Yeah, well, yeah, Frehley's Comet, yeah.
And then what happened was, people say to me, why did you change the name of the band? Why'd you drop that name? Because, on the movie marquees, wherever we played a theater, they never put just Frehley's Comet. They'd say Ace Frehley's Comet. And the other guys in the band would get pissed because it's supposed to be just Frehley's Comet. Eventually I said, look, let's just call it the Ace Frehley Band. Keep things simple. People are coming here to see me more so than you or you or you. And it's been like that ever since.
Well, you've had a wealth of solo material. You've recorded 7 solo albums, including your most recent 10,000 Volts. Let's talk about 10,000 Volts. I want to ask you about Rip It Out, song you co-wrote with Larry Kelly and Sue Kelly. You've collaborated with a lot of, a variety of different artists over your career. One of the most notable, perhaps, is, your collaboration with Pearl Jam. What is your fondest memory of working with those guys? That had to be a real treat to hear the people that have been influenced by you that have been successful with their own music.
Well, whoever I wrote all the songs with, it was great and it was a lot of fun. But none of that compares to working with Steve Brown, my current co-producer. For some reason, when me and Steve got together, magic happened. And I can't even verbalize it. All I can tell you is, when me and Steve get together and start working on a song, magic happens. And the song turns out to be way better than it originally started out as. I think it has to do with the fact that I was a huge influence on Steve when he was younger. And his 2 favorite guitar players were me and Eddie Van Halen. So, he got a chance to work with his idol. So, he was humble in many ways, but wasn't afraid to tell me I'm wrong either, which I appreciated because I don't want somebody I don't want a lapdog. You know what I'm saying? No, but we had disagreements and, 1 or 2 songs, didn't have bridges. I said, the songs need a bridge. And he'd go, no, it's great the way it is. I said, no, it needs a bridge. So I'd write a bridge, we'd record it. And then after I wrote the bridge, he'd go, Ace, you were right. You have more experience than me as a songwriter. And I tip my hat to you or whatever.
Well, let's talk about the title track, 10,000 Volts. Tell me about that one.
Hit me like 10,000
10,000 volts. If I'm not mistaken, I think Steve brought that song to me. I think all I did was rewrite some of the lyrics, and there's the guitar solo, and obviously, I did all the lead vocals on the record, and I'm very proud of it because a lot of people are saying, "Ace, this is some of the best vocal work you've ever done."
I hit the jackpot, no more heads in bets.
And I don't even consider myself a vocalist, you know? Originally, I started singing out of necessity because I didn't have a lead singer. And, with New York Groove, I had to sing that because it was a big hit. And my voice improved over the years. It's crazy. But if you listen to my voice on this current album and listen to the 1978 solo album with New York Groove, my voice really hasn't changed that much. If anything, it's gotten stronger.
Well, Cherry Medicine. Tell me about Cherry Medicine. Great song.
Me and Steve would write a song in a day. He'd come in my studio around noon, and by 5, 6 o'clock, the song was done. You know, that's the kind of chemistry me and Steve had.
And I wake up and I'm next to you. It puts a smile.
It was 50-50, you know. I rewrote a lot of the lyrics in a lot of the songs because I'm a good lyricist. And I don't know why or how I get that, but, I can write lyrics for a song in 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And I did for a lot of these songs.
What about Blinded?
We're blinded by fear.
That was my idea. I called up Steve and I said, listen, we're halfway through the record and all the songs are about girls. I was just reading some articles about artificial intelligence, how one day it may, turn on us. And it was very interesting. And I said, let's write a song about artificial intelligence. And I started coming up with the lyrics for it. And I didn't remember who started with the chords or what. But that was completely my idea for that song.
Digital tug of war, 'cause we're blind.
I initially initiated that song, and Steve came up with some great ideas, and it came out great.
Zeros and ones.
What about Walking on the Moon?
Walking on the Moon was the first song that me and Steve collaborated on. And I remember him sending me an MP3 of the song, and it wasn't called Walking on the Moon. I don't know what the hell it was called. But there was one line, and it wasn't the ending line in the chorus, but there was a line where he said, Walking on the Moon. And I said, hold on right there. That has to be the title of the song, and that has to be the hook.
You got me walking on the moon. Yeah.
We wrote the whole song, and I think I added a bridge on that song, and it just came together.
Yeah.
But he wrote that beginning guitar riff that's really cool. Da 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 da. Yeah, he came up with that. I think it's a great riff.
I got to ask you on this album, what was the moment where you knew, what's the song that stands out to you on this album? The standout track for you?
Every song, I love every song on this record. I don't think there's any filler. Obviously, some songs, I would listen to more than others, but like Back Into My Arms Again, it came out great.
You're coming back into my arms.
I co-wrote the song with Arthur Stead, but I don't listen to it over and over again because I've been around that song for 35, 40 years. I like some of the heavier songs, Fighting for Life is a cool song. There's a lot of variety on this record. And, the song by Nadia, Life of a Stranger. I heard it on the tail end of the Transporter movie. It was over the credits.
Why did you do it? Why did you risk your life for my...
And I knew if I recorded that song and did it heavy, I knew it was going to come out great. And it did. I don't know what to say. I'm just really happy with this record. And I'm really curious as to what my fans are going to think about it and what they're going to say. Because every interviewer that I've spoken to who's heard the whole album just raves about every song.
I think it's your best solo album.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. It may surpass my
Your original
1978 record.
Yeah.
Which was how long ago?
Yeah. Well,
Who's good at math? I'm not.
Yeah, 1978. We're coming as 46 years.
2008.
Yeah, 46 years.
46.
That's 46 years. Yeah. He's going to be celebrating his 50th here in a couple of years, man.
Yeah, I looked up the amount of days I've been on the planet. And I think before the end of this year, it's going to hit 27,000, which makes me 72. But I don't think like I'm 72. I think like
No. You're alive.
Music keeps you young.
Oh, yeah. Well, Ace, looking back on your life, a couple last questions for you here. First one is, if you were to gift the world a double A-side 45, 2 songs that sum up your life, your career with Kiss and solo, what would they be that define you?
That I wrote with or without Kiss?
What's your top 2 with Kiss and your top 2 solo?
That's so hard to answer because there's just so many songs I've done with or without Kiss that I'd have to think about that one for a while. So we'll have to save that for the next interview.
Okay. And then last question is, looking back on your life, your career, both personal and with your music, what are you most grateful for in this moment?
I'm really happy that I'm still able to write good songs and perform them live and tour. I'm very happy with my current touring band. I have a great woman that I've been with for 5 years. We're engaged. And I just have so much to thank God for, all the gifts he's given me. I mean, I can, not only am I a good musician, but I'm a graphic artist, I'm a computer wizard. I do animations. Remember the Psycho Circus tour?
Yeah.
Remember on the screens, it morphed from my makeup to James to Paul's to Peter in a loop? Yeah, I did that animation. Gene couldn't believe it. I did it on my laptop, he goes. The next day, he went out and bought me $15,000 worth of computer equipment. He goes, do what you do. That was sweet of him. Yeah.
Well, Ace, man, what a career. You inspired so many.
My life, when I think back on it, it just seems like a movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem real. I've got guardian angels all around me. I've had 6 car accidents. I had a fractured cheekbone because I picked a fight with a boxer and didn't know it. Uh, but all the car accidents I got up, I walked away from. Yeah, and I destroyed the cars. So I mean, I can't explain it. You know, it's just like I don't feel like it's real. I
Yeah.
don't really feel like my life. It's just too impossible when you think about all the possibilities and where I came from. You know, I used to live in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. You know, we had no money, and here I am. You know, in an 8,000 square foot mansion with 5 cars and a 650-foot driveway, 5 acres, and the bills are paid, and I'm blessed, blessed, and more blessed. And you know, I say my prayers at night, and I say my prayers in the morning, and that's what gets me through the day. A little exercise, a little of this, a little of that. Play a little guitar. Yeah, I just take life one day at a time, like they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I've been sober 17 years. And that made a big difference in my life. I don't think I'd be alive today if I hadn't gotten sober, you know, because I was going downhill fast. But, you know, I don't, I can't explain my life. It's like I said, I feel like my life is movie. It was pre-written. You know, I don't believe in coincidences. You know, destiny. I don't know. I think you know everything that happens to me in my life is supposed to happen, and was predestined a long time ago. Maybe by some supercomputer. You know. But, you know, I believe in God, you know, and so
God is good.
sounds good to me too.
Well, I love it. Well, Ace, thank you so much for the interview, but most of all, thank you for the music. Inspired so many people. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. I had a really good time talking to you, and you had some great questions. And God bless you and your family. And I'd like to just say thank you to all my fans, Kiss fans, Ace fans, any kind of fans that's supporting me. And it was a pleasure.
3 chords in the truth, my friend.
I tip my hat to you, but I don't have one on.
Well, I have one, so I'll tip it to you. Thank you
You know
so
what's
much.
really weird? I was watching a movie the other day, and it was a period piece. And Laura, my fiance, said, everybody used to wear hats. What happened?
Yep.
Nobody wears hats anymore. I mean, yeah, a small percentage.
I know. It's true. Everybody used to wear hats. That's true.
Everybody wore hats, men and women. When was the last time a girl walked into a room with a hat on? You know, like,
Right.
and you know, all that stuff. I mean, it's bizarre. You know, I've seen UFOs on more than one occasion. It's I've seen it and done it all, but I'm still alive and kicking, and I think I'm good for another 5, 10, 15, 20 years because I have longevity on both sides of my family. My dad lived to be 96. My
Wow.
mother lived to be 86, but her older sister lived to be 99. So we got good genes on both sides. You know, I have a sister that's 81. My brother's 74. They're both in good health. And I've just been blessed. I don't know what else to say except if you're a young musician wanting to start out in the business, you know, listen to the old rock and roll. Listen to Jimmy Page. Listen to Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton. You know, those were the guys that taught me how to play guitar, and they can teach you how to play guitar if you can figure out the guitar solos, which isn't the easiest thing to do.
That's right. Well, thanks, Ace. You have a great rest of your day, and congratulations on the solo album.
Thank you so much.
Okay. See you later.
Pleasure. Have a
Bye-bye.
great day. God bless.
You too. Make sure to leave us a comment about Ace. Oh, what a legend. Let's talk about him. Let's celebrate him below.